How's the new consulting gig going? You've been doing it for how long? What, 3 months?
I left my previous role back maybe early August or yeah, August, and planned on just taking the rest of the year off, and figured I would join the next company in Q1 at some point. Haven't really seen my kids for 2 years, and we took some time off, did a lot of fun stuff, and I started meeting CEOs in like October, and I met 30 founders in the course of a month. And it was the same story almost every time. Like I mean, I love early stage founders. It was like, hey, we had hired head of sales and it didn't work out. That set us back 18 months, and now we're back at it, and we're gonna try again. And I immediately picked up 2 consulting opportunities from that, and recognized, like, Jason Lumpkin talks about this all the time. I'd never like seen it in real time happen. And I thought, man, like maybe this is a bigger gap than I realize. And I've been fortunate enough to see it multiple times at that stage. And my wife and I were sitting around the dinner table at Thanksgiving, and bless her heart, we had some runway on our savings account to say, let's take half a year off, and then I'll have a job in January and everything will be good. And I decided at Thanksgiving that I was going to go all in. So I don't know if the timing was perfect or terrible. And she was like, holy shit, what are you doing? But she's along for the ride. So anyways, it's been an incredible response. I feel like so lucky to have the business I have now. And it's only been 2 months ago. I'm barely a month and a half in, and I'm building everything publicly. I've had so many people reach out that want to do the same thing. And I think that's just that's common. It's out there, but nobody knows how to do it or what to do. And so as much as I'm helping startups write the playbook on scalability in their business, I'm writing the playbook on how to go break off and consult full time. And so anyways, if you're interested, you go to my website and sign up for my newsletter. I send weekly updates. I'll be doing a podcast to talk through all the details, very tactical, of like how I went from 0 to hopefully we'll cross 30K next month nice. On monthly recurring revenue. So it'll be good.
That's incredible. 30K monthly recurring revenue.
Yeah. So I'm booking contracts, 4 to 6 month agreements. So right now I'm booked up at right at 30K for February. I did about 14.7 in January.
That's incredible. I mean, for having just launched this, it really speaks to the need in the market. What was that decision like? You mentioned kind of deciding at Thanksgiving dinner, like, all right, I'm going to go all in. But that's a really hard decision for people to make, especially when you've worked at companies and startups for so many years. How'd you really rationalize that, and what advice would you have for people that are maybe thinking about doing something similar?
Well, my first piece of advice is live frugally, because we were lucky enough to be able to do that. And I mean, we're scrappy as shit as a family, and we've always paid cash for everything. There's your like Dave Ramsey quote, I guess. We've always just kept a lot of runway in the bank in case I wanted to do things like this. And I've done this at like multiple jobs at this point, where I kind of just leave and figure out what's next when that time happens. So honestly, I think I'd planned on doing this at some point, but I always thought I had at least 1 or 2 more startups in me. The last 2.5 years have been a grind, man. I mean, we went through some incredible growth, and it was an unbelievable experience. At the same time, my kids are 8, 7, 4, 3, and they're at like a prime stage that I want to be with them, and I want to see them. And I was on, calls 2 and 3 times a week past 9 o'clock at night. And it's just kind of part of what it takes to build that type of high growth startup. And I think it made me realize I don't control my calendar at all to a lot of extent. And I want to be in a position where I can own my calendar a lot more. And as I met with all these founders, it was interesting because there's some amazing companies out there that are building incredible things. And I kind of always thought and told myself I would want to be part of that. I would miss maybe the team aspect. For me right now, I'm finding I'm actually getting that, like scratching that itch in a way by continue. I get involved with my companies in a hands-on way, and I can almost be part of the team on a day-to-day basis. And I'm scratching that itch for now. It works really well for me. And on top of that, I'm a solopreneur. I don't plan on hiring people. That's the goal. I don't want to necessarily scale this. And I get enough interactions with amazing people to help work on these businesses together that I think it scratches that itch for me. So, I tend to make rash decisions sometimes on things like this. So I'm I'm an all-in guy most of the time. And at the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I sold my first business at 18. I didn't know anything different but building business. And, after I sold that, I started my first business when we first got married and ended up selling that 18 months in. And that was kind of a catalyst for me to get into tech eventually. But I think this is where I belong. It's where my passion really lies, is in building something from scratch as much as I can and on my own.
I love it. I want to come back to the first business in a bit. One of the things you said, which I want to double down on, is living frugally. And this is a big belief of mine as well, that the cheaper your expense or the lower your expenses, the more risk you can take. And I think sometimes it's easy to get sucked into the world, especially when you're working a job and have a steady income. You get sucked into kind of buying more, getting a bigger place, spending lavishly, and then that reduces your ability to take risk, or at least your willingness to take risk. And when you instead have low expenses, as low as you can get them, like you said, it increases your runway enough that you can say, you know what, I'm going to take 6 months, give it a try, and if it doesn't work, then I can go get a job. And I think that's been one of my biggest advantages over the last decade or so.
Totally. I mean, we didn't buy toys. It was hard for a long time, right? Like, I have kids, and all of our friends were buying razors and dirt. We live in Utah, right? Like, we're outdoors people to the max, and we didn't start buying toys until 3 years ago, maybe. And that sucked during the time, but now we don't buy anything unless we pay cash for it. And it just allows us to have the freedom to say, I'm going to quit my job randomly, take 5 months off, and what the hell? Let's just start a business from zero and see what it does. So I owe my wife. My wife is, I'm the guy. I can figure out how to make money. I'm not that good at budgeting it. So she handles all that. She's the CFO.
She controls it. She's the one telling you no.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, totally. We would not be where I was. I'd be out buying everything and wanting all the toys earlier.
That's funny. Yeah, I love that. You mentioned Dave Ramsey, and that's the way I live too. It's if I can't pay cash for it, I'm not buying it. Yep. And it's funny because sometimes you see solopreneurs or entrepreneurs or people trying to get started, and they want to go flashy, right? And you see that on Instagram, TikTok. You see people, posing in front of a Lambo that they're leasing because they don't even have enough money to buy it, but they're leasing it for $2,000, $2,500 a month just to make it seem like they're successful. And I think I've found that the most successful people tend to live very frugally because it enables them to invest that money back in their learning, their education, their business, whatever it is, which ultimately leads to greater wealth down the road.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, my wife and I joke, like we run our house like a business. I know down to the dollar that what our monthly expenditures are and what it takes to break even. And, once we hit that, it's like, we're in a great spot. We're not in the black anymore. Like or the red, excuse me. We can have freedom and decide what we want to do. And it gives us way more flexibility.
I love that. How's your calendar now? You mentioned being on calls when you were working till past 9 o'clock. What's it like nowadays?
I mean, I think the biggest difference is like, so I started working a 9 to 5 back like December when I decided to go all in, and my wife and I aligned on the expectation, like it's going to be a grind for a little bit. Like I'm going to be back in the trenches. I'm building from zero. Like I got to figure out how to pay the bills, and we're depleting our savings each month that goes by. We might as well like figure it out. So, I mean, I feel really lucky to have ramped so fast. We paid our bills in January, which is like a huge win for us. now, as I look at like the next 3 or 4 months, I'm in a spot where, I can block off. I have blocked off every Friday and Monday right now completely. And I think I don't plan to like just play those days. That's not reality. But like those are deep work days, but also gives me the choice to say, do I want to work on a Friday and a Monday, or do I want to go take the boat out and get the kids on it? Or, and I don't think that'll be realistic all the time, but right now I'm pretty damn booked. I mean, I've got a lot of calls, Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays. And, then I have an enormous amount of people reaching out that want to connect and pick my brain on consulting, things like that. And frankly, I'm having the hardest time right now trying to balance that a little bit of like, I have so many of these people that want to talk all the time. That's great. But I also need to focus on like continuing to build pipeline, booking people for April, May, June, figuring out how to like make sure my customers have an incredible experience. So I think that's just challenges of normal solopreneurship and balancing my time, but also ultimately the flexibility. I would say the biggest one is I get to shut off when I want. And worst case scenario, it's 5:00 and I just draw the hard line and I don't feel bad about it. I keep telling my wife, it's actually the emotional freedom that I'm not responsible for anyone. I don't have a 80-person team that is trying to get a hold of me and get a deal done on a Friday night at 6 p.m. Or a CEO looking for me on a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. I can shut off and actually be emotionally present. That's been the biggest like learning above all for me.
Incredible. So you're currently working Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with clients, and then Monday and Friday kind of either deep work days or days that you take off because you're creating content, you're writing content on LinkedIn, and you have to source new business, which I think a lot of people forget. They get their first set of clients and then they get so wrapped up in that they forget to source that next set. And then pipeline dries up, revenue dries up, and then they go source, but there's a few month delay. Where are you fitting in the sourcing? Is that what you're doing on Friday and Monday, or are you doing it throughout the week?
Yes, I actually structure it. Tuesday, I take all my customer calls, existing customers. I could squeeze them all in one day. And then I work like async mostly after that. I operate the same way that I would coach a early stage sales team. I'm going to manage my inputs every single day that I do literally Monday through Sunday. I don't call it work because it's just something I do and I enjoy. I'm on LinkedIn all the time anyways. So, I'm connecting with 30 new entrepreneurs every day, like in my ICP, cool. On LinkedIn. I'm asking for one referral every single day from someone, and that could be literally anyone. I mean, I have not quote unquote outbounded a single deal that I've worked or even call I've been on. It's been purely referrals, whether it's VC referrals or friends referrals, or honestly, I take so many calls with early stage founders that maybe aren't quite ready for me, or they just need some advice or something, but a little advice I can give them. And then I have every right to ask for a referral, and I can usually get at least 2 or 3 in return.
I love it. How do you ask that? I think referrals are one of the most powerful things that are underutilized. How do you typically make that ask?
I always give first. I mean, I think Gary Vee talks about this. I read that book like 8 years ago, Jab, 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 Right Hook or something like that. But great book. He talks about that. Like I try to give 2 or at least 3 things to a founder before I come back and say, hey, by the way, do you have something? Do you happen to know anybody that fits in this space that you can intro me? And they always do. I mean, I will take any call with pretty much any founder for that exact reason. And I feel fortunate. Like I spent my early SaaS career building my like LinkedIn network. I have this super deep network, especially in Utah, of people that I can't tell you how many reps and leaders that are constantly reaching out like, hey, what's the next cool company to join? I've gotten really lucky at joining the right companies. And I get my eyes on a lot of companies. And so if nothing else, I can help people get really cool jobs with cool founders. And that's arguably like one of the hardest things as an early stage founder is finding good talent. So if nothing else, I can give them some advice on where they're at and how they should be thinking about it. And also at least connect them to some candidates that they might be able to hire. And then I can come back and say, hey, by the way, who else do you know?
I love that. And I think the idea of managing your inputs and just being consistent every single day, like you said, 30 connection requests, one referral.
Yep.
What else do you do on a consistent daily basis?
So those are my two main inputs. I post every day on LinkedIn. I just started doing that. I did that years ago and built a majority of my following years ago. And then I quit for a long time. And as soon as I decided to go all in, I was like, okay, I need to utilize this audience for something. And so I post on LinkedIn every day, at least once a day. I get an enormous amount of inbound from that, pretty consistently. I'm trying to be able to get to a point where I can quantify it and say like, hey, on average, each post is getting 5,000 or 6,000 views. And here's kind of my conversion rates of inbound leads that come from this. I don't know what that is. I haven't done it long enough, but I think I'll be able to get to a point in the next 2 or 3 months where I could say, okay, it's taken me 8,000 views to get one inbound lead, if that makes sense. So I do that every single day. And the other piece, I've realized, and this is like learning in real time, so shit, I might change my mind in 6 months, but I'm a big portion of what I do is a content business. Not just like content for LinkedIn, but my customers, the same content I'm writing can get repackaged and positioned to help my customers on a daily basis. In addition to that, I'm also building courses to help early stage founders that aren't quite ready for me, that maybe are technical founders that don't have a clue where to start and how to sell, and like the tactical details of how the hell do you go from 0 to 10 customers and then from 10 to 50, and like how can I templatize what I do every day, deliver that to my customers, but also package it up and give it to them as like honestly, it'll be this lead gen for me, a funnel, but also at least give them some guidance on where the hell to start. Because I think founders, it's really hard to know where to go to find that stuff. They look up to VCs typically, or they're trying to dive into their networks or cohorts of YC or whatever it might be, and just ask, well, what else are you guys doing? What worked? But when it comes to like pen to paper, really, really hard to do. You might come back from these great meetings and then say, well, how the hell do I pick up a phone? Do I just call a customer? Like, is that all I do? Do I text them? Like, how often do I call them? What do I say when they pick up the phone? How do I follow up with them? Stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then building that habit and processing it to some degree can be really hard. I think about it back in the early days of Branch, and that was one of the hardest things that it took to figure out.
Yep. Yeah. And you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, what does good look like? Like, should I be making 100 calls to set a meeting? Should I be talking to someone every time I pick up the phone? Like, I don't know what to expect. Is my ACV at $8,000? Is that good? Can I build an inside team? Who should I be hiring at that time? Like, how do I structure their comp plan? Should I hire an SDR or head of sales? Things like that.
Yeah, totally. I think that when you're flying so blind, and everyone has different opinions, right?
Yeah.
But you just don't know. I think about even when I talk to folks that are early and kind of wanted to know how we did it at Branch in the early days, and you think that maybe 100 outbounds a week is sufficient, and then you back into the math and you realize if you want to do $1 million a year, you need to be doing 500 outbounds.
That's right.
Not 100. That's 100 a day, not 100 a week.
Yep.
And then, but you don't know. You have no idea until you actually back into the math and figure out what your conversion rates are.
That's right.
Really fascinating. One of the things that you've posted about a few times that I think is really intriguing is that first sales hire. Because I think there's a lot of companies in that, they start to get some traction. They have early product market fit or signal. They maybe get a few 100,000, maybe, even to $1 million, but they're in that early stage. Founder's been doing all the sales. They're growing as a team, and then they need to hire that first salesperson. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make? And then what advice would you have for a founder that's at that stage?
Yeah, I think the biggest question I get is probably this, like, who am I hiring? Do I hire an SDR? Do I hire an AE that's a generalist? Or do I hire both of them at the same time? Or am I hiring my head of sales? And it seems like fleshing that out is really, really hard. And obviously dependent upon a lot of factors, in my opinion. There's probably a million different ways you could go with this, but I'm always of the opinion of like a founder that can sell for as long as they possibly can is key, and trying to hold on to that. And if a founder is more GTM focused or heavy, that has the chops to somewhat, we'll call it run a team, they should for as long as they possibly can. And, but it's not sexy work. You know what I mean? Like a founder that is go to market heavy maybe hires their first 2 SDRs. Now all of a sudden you're an SDR manager as a CEO. That's no joke. Like that, and they probably never done that job before, and that's hard to do. And now we live in this world where like you're not sitting 2 feet from each other. That has a whole other layer of complexity to it. So I think coming back to your question, one of the key things I look for at that stage is they have to have some sort of entrepreneurial spirit. And I think that reflects in like a handful of ways. More often than not, they've tried or they've done something very entrepreneurial in the past. Even here in Utah, I source a lot from the schools that have entrepreneurship programs. And I love maybe your typical, like they want to go investment banking or venture capital. But they were entrepreneur like majors, and those make phenomenal SDRs because like it shows they want to be part of startups or something if they're kind of going the investment banking or VC route. But they quickly learn, most of them, that like you got to figure out how to sell, and that's probably one of the biggest pieces. And so they want to go be an SDR at a startup. Those work really well, and I think gives them you have that level of scrappiness that's needed at that stage to figure stuff out and be okay with testing something for 3 days and then totally scrapping it and starting over and trying something different 3 days later. So I think that's a key piece. There's so many factors that go into like who do you hire, right? Like I have a good buddy here that I've been working with for 2 years at his startup, just helping him. He's actually in the process of making his first 2 AE hires. But they've gotten to the point as a founding team where they have sold it somewhat repeatably themselves, and they have enough of a playbook in writing that the advice I gave him was like, I feel confident you could hire an AE that's scrappy, and they can take what you've documented and repeat some of it. I think that's the critical piece that most founders miss is like, it's got to be in a playbook form, because you're talking about more often than not, these are like entry level junior AEs or especially SDRs. They've got to have your brain on paper, at least, of the tactical details of how the hell did you go find your first couple customers. And if you can at least get that, you can be in a good spot. I mean, that's the gap I fill often is most founders, they have no clue where to start. So I come in, let me help you write that playbook. Let me give you frameworks on how do you define your ICP? And then the nitty gritty of, great, you found 10 customers. We're going to reverse engineer all of those. How did you find every single one of them? And turns out 50% of them came from like unrepeatable things, which is, oh, the VC introduced me, right? Well, AE can never do that. So let's find the couple that we can reverse engineer and formulate a little bit of a playbook and a structure to say, cool, we have something here. I believe an AE could go repeat some of this, or at least test it more in an outbound strategy or something that an AE can come in or SDR can come in and execute against that.
Yeah. You touched on a few different things, adaptability being kind of a key trait for folks. And I've seen mistakes made, and I've made mistakes myself, even hiring people way ahead of, or at the wrong stage, right? Like a very seasoned coin operated sales rep or AE at the very early days before you even have product marketing materials, you even know how to price.
Yep.
And you're just kind of testing and iterating a bunch. Some of the most successful hires were people that weren't salespeople. They didn't want to be salespeople necessarily. And in fact, I think about our first few hires, they either had an entrepreneurial background, they were career changers, maybe they came from just like consulting and they wanted to get into entrepreneurship, and they felt that was a good way to learn how to sell, because they had the mindset of, we're testing and learning, and I'm not trying to repeat a process. Are you familiar with the old HBR article, Sales Learning Curve?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it talks about those
That's
three
right.
phases. Right? Phase one is usually the founder and CEO, or phase two is kind of like those early people they're more focused on learning and iterating, but they're
Yes.
not going to be coin op. And then you eventually transition, hopefully, if you make it, into the coin phase three, which is the coin operator set. That's where you hire experienced
That's right.
salespeople.
Yeah.
I've always found that to be one of the most helpful frameworks in
Yeah.
thinking about sales.
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, I had a call yesterday with a kid that wants to, he's asking me, when should I join a startup? And I said, honestly, if you're coming from a 3,000 person company, you should join a startup when you have 6 months of runway in your bank account. And if you don't get paid for 3 months, that's okay. And you have to accept that. And but you're going there to learn. And guess what? If it works out, it could be extremely lucrative for you. If it doesn't, you got to be okay with chalk it up for learning. I didn't make any money for 6 months, but then you decide to go from there.
I love it. I love it. What advice would you have for early stage founders? They're maybe around 10 people. They've got those first, 5, 10 customers, not really through scalable ways. But they have good signs of early product market fit.
Mm-hmm.
And now they want to scale it up, right? In terms of how they should scale up, even their own outbounding or getting into more companies. What advice would you give them in terms of how to best outbound? What's effective?
Yeah, I maybe a couple thoughts here. I think the tendency is to hire too early, the sales rep. And I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's just hey, I'll hire a salesperson because they'll solve my sales problems. That's not the case at all. I think a basic rule of thumb I say is when your calendar is so full with sales opportunities each day, let's call it 80% of your day, then you could probably go hire a sales rep. And let's start there. Now, that doesn't ensure their success, right? To your point, we don't know if there's repeatability there. I think my second piece of advice would be you document the hell out of everything, truly everything. And I think the best place to start is any existing customer base you might have and reverse engineering those. Take out the VC ones. Maybe you can, but that's like a founder sales playbook, right? A sales playbook is not going to VCs and rinse and repeating that. But how do we find a couple of these customers, and where did they come from? What was the source of them? What was the channel? That's a big component that's usually missing. Did you actually pick up the phone and call them, or did they come through some email, I don't know, direct mail campaign or marketing campaign, something? So I would reverse engineer those first and at least write down every single step. Take screenshots of the text you sent to prospects, send the email that you sent, put it in a document, and structure that in a way that if you were looking at it through the lens of a brand new SDR that's never sold anything in their life, and they were to look at that document and say, okay, it's your job to make 40 calls tomorrow and send 40 emails, they would at least have a clue of what to do. And if you can do that, you're probably in a hell of a lot better spot than most other CEOs at that stage. It's truly I could call it over document. I mean, I'll give you an example. Workstream last 2 years, when I joined, we were about $400K of revenue, and we were selling to 7 different verticals. Pretty much all founder-led sales to that point, and a combination of referrals, VC intros. But what my CEO did really well is he had enough of a foothold through this referral business that when I came in, we could at least rinse and repeat that. We could hinge on this this referral business that I think was repeatable there. And so when we started selling, we leveraged the hell out of that. We went to our existing customer base, said, hey, I'm new here. I don't know you. We love you as a customer. Who else looks like you or is like you that we should go talk to right now? And by the way, I'll give you $100 gift card for it, and I'll give them 10% off. And the two-sided referral works so well. They want to be the guy that always hooks up their friend to use this product that is helping them. And we could kind of ride that coattails. And if you can rinse and repeat some of that, now all of a sudden you have a channel that's somewhat repeatable. But coming back to my point of documenting, You document every step of that. How did you reach out to your existing customer? How did you identify which customers to be reaching out to? What did you say to them? And what resonated with them? And why did they end up referring to their friends? And what does their friend look like? Are they in your ICP? Are they a bigger type of customer? Did that deal close? What was the hook? Did that one lead to additional referrals? Things like that.
Cool. So reverse engineer your early wins, document the hell out of everything, work with referrals, two-sided referrals.
Yep.
Sounds to be effective. And then, so let's say before you even hire that person, you are documenting, but you want to scale up your founder-led sales. So you're not quite at the point where you want to hire a salesperson. So you're leveraging referrals that get you so far. What else would you do to build your initial business, getting you to that first 400K?
I mean, I think constant iteration is critical. Ideally, and you could figure out some sort of outbound channel. But I'm a fan of trying to test 3 to 4 channels at once, whether that's paid, email marketing, any sort of channel relationships or reseller partnerships. I'm a huge fan of, like, depending on the space that you're selling to, influencer marketing tends to work really well. Finding, I mean, there's some of these niche businesses. They have really heavy influencers. I'll give you an example. We would find the trade shows that all of our ideal customer profile was at, and you go to figure out who's speaking at the conference and figure out how to incentivize them to talk about you on stage. And it's like growth hacky shit, but it works so well, right? And you might spend $100 gift card. They are willing to do that. I guarantee it. It's even better if they're a customer by chance. By the way, I would give away my product to them. Like, just get them to use you for free, whatever it takes for them to talk about you on stage to some extent. That stuff works really well, and people go to conferences to learn. So now all of a sudden, if I can go to this conference and I hear your company's name dropped at 3 of the speaking events I was at, that's incredibly powerful. If I'm there as a founder, even better. You know, I'm walking around. Oh yeah, actually, so-and-so just talked about me. Great to meet you, Mike. I've heard great things about you. By the way, hey, we'd love for you to use us as well. Can I take your picture? Let's take a picture together. Here we go. We take a selfie. Hey, Mike, what's your cell phone number? Let me text you our picture. And all of a sudden, I have your cell phone number. We're having a good time. I text you my picture, and we're already on talking basis. And guess what? I'm calling you tomorrow to see if I can give you my software for free, or, you know, whatever that looks like. I mean, that's pretty growth hacky shit in the early days, but it works. And it gives this presence of, like, I'm everywhere at all times.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's what you need to do, the growth hacking type things. I mean, it's the unscalable things that need to get you that initial momentum. Yep. Once you get that initial momentum, then you figure out how to replicate certain things and how to scale it. But I think about the things that we did in the early days as well. You were going everywhere and trying to be anywhere. I love to take a picture and then text it to them. It's a really good way.
People love selfies these days.
Yeah. So let's say you're, founder-led sales. You get to a point, you hire a salesperson, maybe an adaptable, flexible AE, or kind of generalist that's able to do everything on sales. At what point should founders start thinking about that first sales leader?
That playbook is critical. More often than not, sales leaders have never seen the creation of the playbook. And it's rare to find sales leaders that have seen that. Maybe they've been at early stage, but, like, if it didn't do anything amazing, you can't decide if, like, there was a playbook that was there that was really repeatable. Those are hard hires to make. The 5 million plus, 10 million plus sales leaders, way more of them out there that have seen that next stage of growth. I think founders also, this is like red flag, they think they have product market fit earlier than they actually do. And I think a good way to test that is, especially if you've hired a first couple reps, they should be hitting some sort of number where the unit economics make a little bit of sense. Meaning, if they have a quota and their OTE relative to their quota kind of makes sense, and the LTV of our customer, we have an idea of what that can look like, and our churn isn't crazy, NRR is decent, can I look at those numbers and feel somewhat confident that if I hire a sales leader in, there's a high likelihood they'll increase my ACV. They should increase my deal velocity significantly if I hired the right one. And they'll help me hire reps that can do this over and over again. And I'll probably be able to increase quotas by 20 to 30%. That's how I think about it. I think most founders don't understand what those unit economics need to be to make sense. I think that's why it's crucial to have these network of sales leaders or people who have seen it before, to lean on, to understand and look at the business and say, can we scale an inside sales team to do this? Or does this need to be a field team? Or should I be hiring seasoned enterprise reps? Or how should I think about it? So I think that's a critical piece. I see this over and over again where we kind of look at like, okay, this is an AE, they make $150K a year. They need a $500,000 quota. That's great. Like, very generalized. But I'm not always convinced that is what it needs. It's not like that for every business. Sometimes the unit economics don't quite make sense to do that, especially if you're doing a specialized model of SDR and AEs. Do they need to be generalists? Do you have some sort of like PLG motion that could work potentially to where you actually don't even need AEs? They're just product advocates, like Atlassian talks about, that do onboarding, things like that.
I love that. One of the rules of thumb I've heard before too is before you really scale up sales, get to a point where your first AE or two can basically pay for themselves, maybe pay for 2x themselves. If you're not there yet, if you're at a point where you hire a salesperson, they can't even pay for themselves, like 1x their OTE in terms of what they're able to close, then you probably don't have product market fit, and you still have a lot of work to do to figure out before you scale.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's a great rule of thumb to be thinking about, of like, if they can't pay for themselves in 12 months, there's something wrong there. And you probably need to figure that out before you hire someone else to come in and help fix it.
Yeah. Okay. So for you, what's the goal? What's success look like for you 5 years down the road?
I don't know, man. That changes every day. Right now,
you mentioned earlier you wanted to kind of stay a solopreneur.
Yeah.
Not hire people.
Yeah. I mean, if I've learned anything, I'll never, I can change my mind anytime. And, so right now, that's how I feel. I love it. I love what I do. I love the customers I get to work with. I think there's so many directions I could go. Honestly, I think about it all the time. I think there's opportunities to help others do what I'm doing right now. I think I love that idea. It seems fun to me. Right now, I really enjoy working with early stage founders. I had a meeting this morning with a small PE shop, and some of the stuff they're doing is super interesting. They're buying up $1 to $3 million SaaS companies that are profitable, and kind of piecing them together, and that kind of sell into similar spaces. Like, I think that stuff's super interesting. I don't know if that's where I fit in there, but like, I don't know. As of right now, I like building business. How about that? And I'm sure I'll always be building something to some extent. Success right now looks like, do I get to see them and hang out with my kids a hell of a lot more?
I love that. I think that's a fair measure of success. Any final advice for somebody that might be or have been thinking about going out on their own, but is afraid to take that leap?
Yeah. There's a lot of people that have done it, especially this solopreneur stuff. As I dive into it, there's plenty of very successful people. I think try to understand. Don't do what I did. Don't just leave your job and then realize a month as you're getting to the end of your runway that like you're gonna go all in. It could be done during your full-time job. It's not that hard to do. You can start building some playbooks for yourself and potential repeatability to eliminate the burden that when you decide to step away full-time, you at least have some success under your belt. That's probably number one piece of feedback. Number two is coming back to like, make sure you have 12 months of runway, at least 6 or 12 months of runway in your own bank account. And if you have that, if nothing else, I mean, you buy yourself time and a hell of a lot of experience. For sales leaders, there's always demand. There's always demand for sales leaders. I've always thought, like, worst case scenario, what would happen? I get a job. I don't want that to happen, but that's kind of my philosophy. And I don't know, enjoy the journey. That's maybe cliche as shit, but I heard a quote the other day that is, if there's once in a while you got to break out the fine china, and when there's good people around, break out the wine and enjoy it. And I love that saying, and thought, man, that's my life philosophy right now. There's a time to break out the fine china and wine with good people. I'm going to do it.